Atheists love cherry-picking Bible verses about slavery to prove that God is terrible and not loving at all. Admittedly, there are a lot of uncomfortable verses in the Bible. But in this video, we'll go through everything the Old Testament law says about slavery, and you'll be amazed by how perfectly God designed those laws. I would rather be a biblical slave than live in an atheist society. In fact, people enslaved according to the biblical model had a better chance at life than many people graduating from college today. I'll prove that in a couple minutes. But first, let's look at two passages that atheists will never mention because they completely destroy the slavery argument against God. Deuteronomy 24. If a man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel, and makes merchandise of him, or sells him, then that thief shall die. God does not want anyone forced into slavery, but we're going to see how God uses slavery to accomplish what our society has failed to do. And then we have Deuteronomy 23. You shall not deliver unto his master the servant which is escaped from his master unto you. He shall dwell with you. You shall not oppress him. The word that the King James translates as servant in that passage is often translated as slave by many newer Bible translations. But the problem is it uses a broad definition of the word slave, whereas nowadays in our culture we have a very limited, a very fine definition of slave. It is someone who is bought and sold and treated as property with no protections. But that's not really the biblical model of slavery. It would be better to translate that word bondservant. In the Bible there are hired servants, like an employee, but then there are also bondservants. And they don't have the freedoms that a hired servant would have, but they do have protections, and we're going to see those in a minute. If a slave master is mistreating a slave and the slave runs away, the slave master has lost his right to own that slave. God cares about slaves, and he wants them protected. He wants them to eventually prosper. You'll be surprised by how much being a bondservant can actually help people in the Bible. But first, let's understand the protections that God gives to bondservants. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your manservant, nor your maidservant, that your manservant and your maidservant may rest as well as you. Masters don't get to work bondservants as much as they want. Every week, those bondservants will get one day to rest. Completely rest, do absolutely no work on that day. And then we have Exodus 21. And if a man smite his servant, all these passages that we're reading are using that same word that is translated as slave, but should probably be translated bondservant. And if a man smite his servant, or his maid with a rod, and he die under his hand, he shall be surely punished. So that limits the most extreme abuse. But a master is allowed to punish a bondservant, because it is important for the bondservant to learn discipline. But God still sees that bondservant as a human, and the master is not allowed to kill him. Now, the protections are more than that. Continuing in Exodus 21. And if a man smite the eye of his servant, or the eye of his maid, that it perish, he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. And if he smite out his manservant's tooth, or his maidservant's tooth, he shall let him go free for his tooth's sake. Punishment for the sake of discipline was allowed, but abuse was not. If you abused your slaves, they got to go free. God sees slaves as people. God cares about them, and he protects them. Now there's a positive side to being a bondservant. It was such a better system than the chronic homelessness we see all over California. It produced much better results than government welfare. The biblical system actually gave people dignity and a second chance at life. Let's see how the Bible accomplishes that. Deuteronomy chapter 15. And if your brother, a Hebrew man or Hebrew woman, be sold unto you, and serve you 6 years, then in the 7th year you shall let him go free from you. And when you send him out free from you, you shall not let him go away empty. You shall furnish him liberally out of your flock, and out of your floor, and out of your winepress. Of that wherewith the Lord God has blessed you, you shall give unto him. People primarily went into slavery because of debt. They had faced challenging situations, and their businesses had failed, or their crops had failed, or they'd made bad choices, or they just really weren't good at business. But in 6 years, they get to start again, debt-free. And they've spent those 6 years learning discipline, learning how to do a trade or business or agriculture. They've been trained by successful and wise businessmen. That's not that different from an internship or an apprenticeship or a PhD. It's actually much better than an unpaid internship. And it's much better than many college graduates who graduate with tons of debt and are struggling to find jobs. Proverbs 22 says, "The borrower is servant or slave to the lender." Many college graduates are starting their careers as slaves. Now, this next passage is often mocked, but that only shows ignorance of the Old Testament law and of God. Exodus chapter 21. "If you buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve you, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. If he came in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he were married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master has given him a wife, and she has borne him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out by himself. And if the servant shall plainly say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him unto the judges. He shall also bring him to the door, or unto the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall serve him forever." That bondservant, before he would marry a woman that his master would give him, would know the law, and know that when he goes out free, she would stay there, and any children that they had. Why would the law say that, though? That bondservant had come into slavery because he had failed to provide for himself. He had fallen into debt, and now he must prove himself. He's been trained for 6 years, and now he must show that he can provide for himself and provide for a family. If he can, then he can earn some money and redeem his wife and children out of slavery. But if he can't, then they stay there. While they're working, they are protected and provided for by the master. So God cares about them. But the bondservant also has another option. He may say, my master has treated me well. He's treated my family well. It is better that we continue serving him. We're going to do that for the rest of our lives. Now, why would anyone ever choose that option? Well, the Old Testament is putting this as the standard that masters should shoot for. At the end of those 6 years, you should have treated that servant so well that he will consider continuing to serve you forever. Now, he may not. He has the freedom to go out. He may think that, hey, I really want to enjoy my freedom. But he may say, wow, it is so much better in the house of my master. Now we have to look specifically at female bondservants because the law treats them differently. And you may wonder reading these passages, does God hate women? Again, Exodus 21. "And if a man sell his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. If she please not her master, who hath betrothed her to himself, then shall he let her be redeemed. To sell her unto a strange nation, he shall have no power, seeing he has dealt deceitfully with her. And if he have betrothed her unto his son, he shall deal with her after the manner of daughters. If he take him another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage, he shall not diminish. And if he do not these 3 things unto her, then shall she go out free without money." God certainly does not hate women. He has designed these laws to protect them and to provide for them. A woman, when she is free in her father's house, is protected and provided for by her father. But when he fails and he's not able to, then she is sold to a master who then has the responsibility to do that. If while she is there, one of her relatives is able to redeem her and buy her out of that servanthood, then they can do that. But that master is not allowed to sell her to foreigners. They don't follow the same laws. They don't have the same restrictions. And God says she's not allowed to be abused or neglected over there. Don't put her in that situation. If all the men in her life fail, she is not stuck in an abusive or neglected situation. She goes out free, and God through the law provides for her. We won't go through those details now, but they are demonstrated in the story of Ruth. Now Leviticus 25. "Both your bondmen and your bondmaids, which you shall have, shall be of the heathen that are round about you. Of them shall you buy bondmen and bondmaids. Moreover, of the children of the strangers that do sojourn among you, of them shall you buy, and of their families that are with you, which they begat in your land, and they shall be your possession. And you shall take them as an inheritance for your children after you, to inherit them for a possession. They shall be your bondmen forever." So foreign slaves in Israel did not get to go free after 6 years. They were slaves for the rest of their lives. Why would God do that? God is saying it is better to be a slave forever in the house of someone who serves God than to return to a life of sin and idol worship. Now we've looked at the protections and provisions for bondservants under the Old Testament law. But let's finish really quickly with two examples that show the potential for bondservants in the Old Testament. 2 Samuel 9. Ziba was King Saul's bondservant, and we can assume that he was not of Israel because he had to keep serving Saul's grandson, Mephibosheth. But notice that Ziba, who was a bondservant, had 20 bondservants that belonged to him. Later, there was a bit of a complicated situation between King David, Ziba, and Mephibosheth. David said to Mephibosheth, "You and Ziba divide the land." And Mephibosheth said unto the king, "Yea, let him take all." Ziba was just a foreign bondservant, a foreign slave, and yet he inherited all of King Saul's property. Now, our second example is the bondservants of King Solomon. And when the queen of Sheba had seen all Solomon's wisdom, and the house that he had built, and the meat of his table, and the sitting of his servants, that's his bondservants, his slaves, and the attendance of his ministers, and their apparel, and his cupbearers, and his ascent by which he went up unto the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. And she said to the king, "It was a true report that I heard in mine own land, of your acts and of your wisdom. Howbeit I believed not the words, until I came, and mine eyes had seen it. And behold, the half was not told me. Your wisdom and prosperity exceeds the fame which I heard. Happy are your men, happy are these your servants, your bondservants, your slaves, which stand continually before you, and that hear your wisdom." The queen of Sheba had examined everything, and was amazed that King Solomon's servants, his slaves, were not like hers. God's system was so much better than what the world had created around them. God designed the system of bondservants to lift the poor out of poverty and give them life. But our society mocks God's design. It takes advantage of the poor in every possible way. The same is true for how our society fails to protect women. Watch this video to see the truth about how God designed men and women to provide and protect.